If you used a computer during the mid to late 2000s, you probably crossed paths with the beloved chilly web game known as Club Penguin, a kid-centered MMO where you played as a customizable penguin and just kind of vibed. It was emblematic of the internet in the 2000s. Fun, lighthearted, and carefree for the most part. Fast forward to now, where the internet is looking bleaker than ever and without Club Penguin. These two issues are undoubtedly connected, and to understand why, we need to go deeper. The 2000s are kind of what I would consider the heyday of the internet. It was a time when the internet speeds were fast enough to be bearable, and it still felt new, interesting, and exciting. More people were using it than ever before. Even your tech-illiterate grandma could figure it out, and everyone was using the internet to make cool-ass websites and online projects in general. There was an air of what if on the internet that was palpable, and it bled into the real world, especially in more nerdy circles. This environment came in the wake of the dot-com bubble, a period of time where a ton of money was poured into the internet, creating a number of websites we have today and a ton that we don't. Oh flues, how I miss you. This bubble burst right around the turn of the millennia, and with large capital investments on the decline, the internet became a place that was more approachable for everyday people. Although, to be fair, this was partially because of the importance of user experience during the bubble. So without it, it's hard to say where the internet would be today. So with the improvements from capital investment, but without the capital itself, the perfect environment for small projects to flourish was born. And a major part of these small projects was web games. I'm sure everyone watching this has played a web game at some point in their life, but in case you haven't, it's basically a game that you play in a web browser. Surprising, I know. These were at their peak throughout the 2000s when web-based games were in high demand. In addition to sites like Addicting Games, Poptropica, Miniclip, and of course Club Penguin, major media companies also started putting web games on their websites, with companies like Nickelodeon and Disney having a ton of games for their TV shows and movies. These games were mostly aimed at kids, as were web games in general, but people of all ages loved them and played them, and they were also important for producing a ton of the game developers we have today. Club Penguin was among the biggest of them, peaking as the 8th most visited social networking site in 2007, up there with monsters like LinkedIn, Facebook, and MySpace. And honestly, I think it's the best of the bunch, especially compared to what these sites have become now. It's hard to explain what made Club Penguin so special, but I think it starts with the novelty of the concept. A whole society made up of funny-looking penguins. Who wouldn't like something like that? But there was so much more that made this experience special. There was surprising depth and complexity to it, while still being simplistic enough on the surface that anyone could enjoy it. Plus, there was so much that you could do. You could play mini games to earn coins for cosmetics and house upgrades, or you could buy a pet puffle and take care of that, or you could become a secret agent, and so much more. And it stayed relatively fresh thanks to the dedicated staff constantly putting out seasonal events and adding more to do. It was kind of like a super early live service game, but instead of handing out battle passes, it was new igloos. I played this game a ton in elementary school, and I probably would have played a lot more of it if my parents had got me the paid version, which they didn't for that exact reason. To me, it's truly the best example of just how fun the internet felt in the 2000s. But as we left the 2000s and entered the 2010s, things started to change. Smartphones became the norm, and with them came the large-scale popularization of social media platforms. So, over time, people turned in their tuxedos for misinformation and racism. Now, I'm not saying that sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are directly at fault for the downfall of the internet and Club Penguin, but I think it's pretty indisputable that they've played a part in it, right? While a lot of social media sites started out pretty primitive and just a way to keep up with friends and family, it didn't take long for that to change. People quickly saw the money-making potential here, and with the massive popularity these sites were gaining year over year, that opportunity to make some dough was only growing. I think this commodification of the internet has played a large part in why it feels so much emptier than it used to. When people were building websites in the 2000s, they were doing it for fun, and it was done mostly by nerdy people who wanted the aesthetics of the site to be fun too, even in the case of businesses, largely because they were the only ones who knew how to build websites, so the businesses didn't really have a choice. But as the internet grew, and as businesses became more dependent on the internet, the whole thing became a lot more sterile. Websites went from being built with personality and little regard for aesthetic concern to being built to be as inoffensive as possible, so that no one who clicked on the site had a negative reaction to it in order to make sure buyers didn't click off immediately. In theory, this might not sound too bad, but if a website is designed to create no negative reaction, it probably won't create any positive ones either. It's just blah. There's a reason people say the opposite of love and hate is indifference, and that is what these new age corporations were going for. In a way, it kind of reminds me of how the color distribution of cars has changed over the years too, with neutral colored cars becoming more popular as time goes on. This corporatization of the internet did make a ton of businesses more profitable, without a doubt, but it also made the internet way more boring and frustrating to use. In addition to making websites more neutral, the corporatization of the internet also meant the widespread use of ads. It's no secret that ads are probably the worst part of the internet. I mean, you can't even watch a YouTube video without being bombarded by ads. But would you believe me if I told you that wasn't always the case? That getting 2 30-second ads on a video wasn't always the norm? That you could scroll on TikTok for hours and not get a single TikTok shop ad? Because that's what it was like for a lot of sites in their early days. But of course, the need to make money changed that. In general, the main reason that something like this happens is that a website is funded by a venture capital group or some other profit-focused entity, and without ads or some sort of monetization on the website, they can't make their money back. So the people who built the website need to find a way to make money for the people who gave them money, or else that money goes away and the site they care about can't run anymore. Just another example of how profit-seeking has been negative for the internet. And a lot of the web games we talked about earlier in this video were not able to monetize in the same way. Sure, some of them did have paid memberships, but there's a big difference between revenue from that and revenue from ads. Ads generally pay more and are less dependent on the economic status of the user. They can also be targeted towards audiences, meaning the value of the ad is higher as the likelihood someone will click on it is also higher. But it's a lot harder to target a subscription to someone, you know? It's either something they want or don't want. Plus, it's more effort to sign up for a subscription in general, and that was another way these web games fell behind. But that's not the only way these social media platforms created an environment that was disadvantageous to traditional websites. They were also massively centralizing. The goal of every social media platform is to keep you, the user, on it for as long as possible, basically to get you addicted to that yummy dopamine drip that it provides, so that you feel the need to sit there and use the site for hours. This is mainly done by creating strong emotional connections with the site. Whether that be joy or fear or anger doesn't really matter as long as you're staying on the site, because that means they are making money off of you. This was mainly done through algorithms, which select content for you that it thinks you will interact with or stay engaged with for a long time. And it's the exact reason you got served this video. Every social media site has an algorithm of some sort, with many being introduced in the early to mid 2010s, with Instagram and Twitter being the latest to introduce theirs. This desire to keep users engaged for as long as possible was another blow to the rest of the internet. There are only so many hours in a day, and when you're using a social media platform, you can't really be using any other websites. I mean, I guess you could have YouTube on your TV, TikTok on your phone, and Reddit on your computer if you're really terminally online, but still. Because these sites got really good at keeping people engaged, people started using off-platform sites less and less. There's a meme nowadays that everyone pretty much uses the same 6 websites, and that 99% of the internet is unused for casual consumption, and that's pretty much how it is. Even as I'm sitting here preaching about how bad these sites are for the internet, they are by far the sites that I use the most on a day-to-day basis. Now, granted, that is partially because it's part of my job now, but even before it was part of my job, I still use them the most. The most adventurous I get with my web surfing now is archives for research and footage, or a random website that I find from a Wikipedia link, or for porn. This centralization also only got worse over time as these social media platforms started adding features that expanded their umbrella of utility, such as Facebook adding the marketplace or Twitter adding the news and trending sections before it went to shit. Now, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing when a company tries to improve a product like this, but it can still have a negative impact on the internet as a whole, even if that wasn't the intention. It was around the same time that these social media platforms started entering the mainstream that web games started to fall to the wayside. Club Penguin was reporting less and less revenue every year, and it wasn't the only site to do so. A lot of the 2000s era sites saw a decline, and as much as I'd like to blame it solely on the corporatization of the internet and the rise of social media, we have to be honest here, there is some responsibility on the sites themselves. If you're not able to adapt to a changing environment, of course you're going to get left behind. All things come and go, and eventually people would have moved on from these websites regardless of the changes made to the internet. People grow older and their interests change as the world changes. The novelty of the internet wore off in the 2010s, and I think it took the love for novel websites with it. For many, it seemed like the golden age of messing around on a school computer was coming to a close, and it took a number of popular 2000s era sites with it to the grave. And one of those was, of course, our beloved Club Penguin, which shut down in 2017. At least, officially. A lot of the sites I highlighted earlier in this video still exist in some capacity, with fan-made projects keeping many of the games alive today, including Club Penguin. And there are still a few non-social media sites around that feel like those early 2000s sites, such as Neil.fun, which is a bunch of short creative games that has 0 ads. So you still can access this sense of whimsy that existed in the 2000s. It's just a lot harder to find. But there is one relic of this bygone era that has become massively successful in today's ecosystem, a Square game that started operations in 2002, Roblox. To be clear, my experience with Roblox is pretty limited. I've only played like a couple of rounds of Dress to Impress where I was robbed of my win, like how did this not win the Widow category? But it is the last surviving vestige of this style of 2000s websites that I and so many others miss. Now obviously, it does come with the major downside of being populated solely by children, which doesn't exactly entice me into playing it, but the point still stands that it survived, and it did so through adaptation. From what I've heard and seen in my research, this site has changed a lot over the years, so it seems like a somewhat modernized version of what we miss, and it has two main reasons for its success. The first being high monetization, and the second and more important one is user-generated content, basically allowing users to build their own games in Roblox, which helped keep attention on the game as a whole. And I think this makes Roblox as a whole the real successor to web games. If you compare it to a site like Addicting Games or Cool Math Games, it's pretty similar, being a platform that houses a ton of games made by individuals or small dev teams. So I guess it really is one of the last things keeping the spirit of the 2000s alive. Even though websites like Club Penguin do still exist, I think it's clear that the internet has largely moved on from them. None of them are anywhere close to the most visited sites these days, and I think it very clearly shows that the priorities of the internet have changed. What should be a tool for communicating, learning, and leisure has devolved into a tool primarily for making money. Sure, there are still ways to enjoy it. I mean, that's why you clicked on this video, right? But even this video makes money, both for myself and YouTube. And to be clear, a lot of the sites in the 2000s did exist to make money too, right? As I said earlier, there was a paid version of Club Penguin, and plenty of other sites did have some form of advertising on them, even if it was less intrusive than it is now. But I think this is one of the major differences. In general, the way sites make money off of their users has become a lot more invasive. Back then, there was practically no microtransactions or gambling systems or cosmetics that cost real-life money, at least not on the web games in that era. The over-commodification of the internet has made it so much less enjoyable and less human feeling. It all feels so optimized for profit. Surfing the web used to mean something. Now, for the majority of users, it just means falling into the whirlpool of Reddit, Twitter, or Facebook. In general, I think the internet acts kind of as a reflection of humanity. When humanity has a positive outlook in the future, like in the 1990s and early 2000s, that was reflected by the internet by being fun and exciting. Now though, 20 years later, I feel like there's a lot less people excited for the future. If anything, people look to the future with fear and anxiety, and that is reflected and fueled by the internet. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that as people got more serious on the internet reflected that, and the sites that represented a time with more whimsy were left in that time, if that makes any sense. Also, I could be completely wrong. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's all I've got to say on this topic, so if you made it all the way to the end, please be sure to subscribe. I'm trying out a new style of video now, so if you enjoy it, make sure to subscribe to tell YouTube who to show it to. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next week for another video.